Okay, well, we're right at 11:30, so I'm going to go ahead and welcome us all to our second webinar in our smoke-free housing series. Today, we are going to talk about expanding and implementing new policies. Just a quick reminder for our etiquette on these Zoom calls, be sure that you're on mute unless you're asking a question, or feel free to use the chat as freely as you'd like to. I'm happy to monitor that and share that with our panelists. We'll do a quick reintroduction of our three panelists today. We have Susan Tatum with the Lincoln Housing Authority, Jeff Sokup with Tobacco Free Nebraska, and Shar Day with Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights Foundation. So Shar, go ahead and take it away, get us started.
Thank you, Sophia. So, we're talking about our smoke-free multi-unit housing policies. And one of the very first things we need to do, of course, as we're just getting started, is to already plan for enforcement. And that means to develop a compliance plan. We like the word compliance. To think about how complaints and violations will be addressed and put that in writing. And what counts as evidence for violation? How do I talk to the residents about the policy? Who has what roles and responsibilities when it comes to this policy? And then to put together a frequently asked questions flyer, which the team there at Sophia's shop can help out with that too. But of course, we also need to train the staff on the compliance plan, which is so important. So after the policy is adopted, it's super important then to just communicate with everybody. So we need to first start with the residents and send a letter formally announcing the change and all the details that there are in there. And then go ahead and start to address common questions and concerns, and then send this information out everywhere, from posters and flyers, newsletters, on all social media, and more if you're able to. So next comes how to work with the residents. So we really have learned that resident education sets the stage for good compliance, and we'll hear more from Susan about this, but engaging residents builds awareness and respect, and why this policy is important to me, not only me, but also my community, and why should I follow the new rule? And all of it just fosters this great culture of health and respect. And of course, as part of educating the residents, is our advice is to hold resident meetings, if at all possible, right? I mean, it'd be great to hold them outside if the weather would hold, and with masks and with enough social distance space around there. But it's important to hold these residents meetings in one way or another. And you can have the host be the manager, but also the tobacco control community there with Sophia's team and partners, and have an opportunity just to ask questions and get answers where we can address these misconceptions right from the start and concerns people might have. Also share stories about the benefits of smoke-free buildings and healthier residents, and as much as possible have that be culturally appropriate, so that everybody feels heard. But what are some of the common questions? This is one we hear so often. Does this new policy mean all the smokers are kicked out? The people who smoke can't live here? And the answer is a great big no. People who smoke can still live at our property. And they don't need to quit. This is not about asking you to quit, although we would really like it. But this is not about asking you to quit. This is just regulating where smoking and vaping is allowed. And our policy says people cannot smoke indoors in certain specific outdoor areas if you have that as part of your policy. Another common question is, isn't this a violation of smokers' rights? Well, the answer is no to that one too. Smoke-free policies are non-discriminatory because people who smoke are not a protected class, and there's no constitutional right to smoke. So therefore, landlords can have rules about smoking because in actuality, it's a health and safety issue. People can still smoke, and the policy just regulates where it's allowed. Another question is, where can people go to smoke? Well, people just need to step outside, away from the doors and windows. And depending upon your particular policy, it may be that you want them also to step away from the ventilation intake systems too, just depending on what your policy is all about. And then this is a chance to then explain if your property has a designated outdoor smoking area. But what about those residents with mobility challenges? Let's say they're in a wheelchair and they smoke. Well, the smoke-free policy is universal. It applies to everyone in the building, but let's put together a plan to make it easier for everybody, even those who have some mobility issues, may have some difficulty getting around. Let's make it easier for those folks to follow the policy. And some ideas for that would be to make outdoor smoking area accessible with a handrail, a ramp, maybe some lighting, maybe a heat lamp. Use nicotine replacement therapy, and Jeff will talk a little bit more about cessation. And then maybe team up to form smoke buddies. So right now I'm going to hand it off to Susan, and she's going to share some insights from Lincoln Housing Authority. Take it away, Susan.
All right, thank you, Shar. So really the biggest piece when we went smoke-free was to work with our partner, Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, in kind of developing our plan. We have a lot of properties across Lincoln, and we did not start off going smoke-free at all of our properties at once. We really started out with public housing, which was mandated by HUD. That was our first property that we started out with, and that was good for us because we were able to learn what worked, what didn't work, enforcement, those types of things. And that really, we were able to build on that as we went smoke-free in our other properties in the future. But the biggest piece that we know and we learned is that communication with your current tenants is key. So when you've come up and developed a plan that you want to go smoke-free, the best thing to do is to share that with tenants, let them know what you're proposing, when your proposal date is, and to have those meetings if possible, so that tenants can share their concerns, ask questions why you're choosing to do this, all of the things that Shar really went through, and you can just explain to them what that's going to look like. We set a target date, and once that target date hit, what we did was, for most of our properties, the target, so say the target date would be June 1st, we were going to go smoke free. That would have been for just what we decided to do. That would have been for new move-in. So anyone that moved in June 1st or after, they were under that smoke-free policy. And then we did have a little bit of a window for people in our apartment complexes that were already smokers. We did give them a little bit of extra time to after that smoke-free policy started, for the new move-ins to stop and move on. So I think we gave about 6 months typically. And so, there was concern that that was going to be confusing for people. Some people could be still smoking in the buildings, other people couldn't, but really it worked out well, and we were able to go smoke-free completely. We did have to come up with the 3 senior buildings that I oversee. We did come up with a smoking area for them. We put up shelter type areas that are heated in the winter, and they protect you from the elements for the most part. And so that's where our seniors can go out and smoke. And then we have designated smoking areas for our other properties. So the biggest piece then too is to just be clear with the tenants about what the consequences are if they do smoke. What's that going to look like? That's a lease violation. So what do lease violations look like? So again, communication really is the key there. And then the last piece is really just making sure your staff are aware of what your enforcement policies are, and that we're all on the same page, and we're all talking to each other about what to look for with smoking, how do we communicate with tenants about that? And then just to continue to have that constant communication through newsletters, those types of things with tenants, so that they're aware again of the policies and procedures and expectations on smoking. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Jeff now, and he is going to talk about some cessation resources.
And I think we'll have some time at the end for questions, but I know that Bonnie had one about setting up, or what does a compliance plan look like? And I think as we're giving out ideas about what are the things that you can do leading up to the implementation date of the new policy or the new lease agreements, I mean, I think the plan is, and we can certainly share that with the group, but the plan is, what are you going to do when? And so I think thinking of as many different education opportunities, as many different points of engagement that you have with your tenants, as far as letting them know, here's the date and here's what's going to change on this date. And so I think back a little bit to when we implemented the state smoke-free law, the state smoking ban. And luckily we had over a year before that implementation date happened. But during that time, we did a lot of different education campaigns and ways of getting the word out to bars and restaurants and other workplaces in order so that they knew that on June 10th, this new law goes into place. And so one of the things as you're thinking about your cessation plan or your implementation plan is to make sure that you're including cessation in that messaging as well. For some of those tenants with that policy change, that's going to be the moment when they decide, okay, maybe it's time for me to quit. Maybe it's time for me to set that as my quit date, or set a quit date ahead of that. And there's lots of resources that are out there to help tenants, and that's something that you can provide out to them as well. And I think keeping it in a positive message, you're not asking them that they have to quit. You're asking them that they're going to have to go to a different place besides inside their unit in order to smoke, whether that's outside or a designated area, whatever. And so there's a lot of resources that we have. If you're looking to see, you can always email me, talk to Sophia at smokefree.ne.gov. There are resources available as well. And so there's no wrong door. So just ask if you wonder what might be out there and what might be helpful. We have through the state a number of different resources. One of them is the state or the Nebraska Tobacco Quit Line, which is a absolutely free resource for any Nebraskan. Doesn't matter income, et cetera, but that's a free confidential counseling line so that folks that are interested in quitting or helping someone that's quitting, they can call that line 24/7. It's available in just about any language that you can think of, so that there's always a counselor that's available for whoever's calling in from Nebraska to help them set a quit date. It might be that they're having trouble with relapse, whatever it might be, that counselor is there to answer those questions or to help them through that, and will be available on an ongoing basis to set up a quit plan for them and follow up as well. There's free NRT, nicotine replacement therapy, that's available through the quit line as well. And so a lot of resources there, because here at Tobacco Free Nebraska, we're here to help in that quit attempt in a lot of different ways. And so you can provide that support for residents who smoke, and it's a policy that can encourage quit attempts, and it can help people cope with adjusting to the smoke-free policy.
Great, thanks for that information, Jeff. I think next we're going to just show some of the resources we have available at LLCHD and Tobacco Free Lancaster County. So Shelby, if you could share that with us.
Absolutely. So here at the health department, we do have some free resources for you to utilize if you wish. We do have a free toolkit just to help get you started. Free technical assistance. Sophia is a great resource. I'm still learning all the ins and outs, so I will do my best, but Sophia is an awesome resource to utilize. We do have free yard signs and free window decals and free door hangers for you to hang up as a reminder, and those are what is pictured here on the slide.
And one thing just to add, as you're setting up that implementation plan or that compliance plan for folks, I think an example or a template for that is inside that toolkit. So that's available for folks, and the door hangers can be part of that plan as well. You can set a date to say, okay, a month out of the policy, we're going to hang the door hanger. The door hanger has a place to write in the implementation date, and you can put that on every door. Don't just target the smokers. Let everybody know that the policy is going to be changing. And that's just, again, another way to keep getting the word out and getting people ready for that implementation date.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. I also wanted to add in that we do have just the traditional icons of the no smoking or no use of electronic cigarettes that are also available for use if you have an existing property that you just want to have more signage in general available. Speaking of that, I did want to, or I had a question for the panel regarding what expansion of these policies would look like. We touched on a lot on implementation, but if you already have a plan, what sort of expansion options are there?
That's such a good question, and thanks whoever asked it. That's a great one. What we've noticed is that sometimes we'll put together a policy, and then the tobacco industry will come in with a new product, and we have to then expand the policy to include that product, like electronic cigarettes. Or here in Colorado, we've had to expand it to include marijuana, just because you would think it would be obvious, but it's not unless you call it out. Or an expansion could be maybe instead of smoking needs to stop at the front door, maybe it's that smoking needs to stop, 10, 15, 20 feet before the door so that all that smoke doesn't waft in when people walk in the door. Any other thoughts, Susan or Jeff?
Yeah, I know for a number of property managers and public housing authorities as well, before the HUD rule went into effect, it may be that they had set up perhaps just one building that they started with as far as the smoke-free building. So they might have a community of 9 buildings within that apartment community. And so they maybe started with 1 or 2, and the expansion might be, we're going to be adding all 9 of them all together. And so and again, I think a lot of the tips and a lot of the ideas and a lot of the planning would be the same. Don't just assume because you already have part of one that expanding it's going to be a piece of cake and just a matter of putting out an announcement. Thinking through that same process of how do we educate, give enough time for folks. And so, because the goal is going to be 100% compliance, no complaints. And so you're setting up a plan to educate folks so that that's the case. And that for those that are going to go rogue and for those that will thumb their nose at the policy, they're going to stand out because everyone else is being compliant. I think that makes it a lot easier to deal with that, just that one particular tenant that's decided to just, they're going to try to get away with it for a while or test the lines a little bit.
Great, thank you for that, Char and Jeff. We have another question here that came in with registration. We got a lot of great tactical information during our presentation, but does anybody have any personal experiences that they could share about actually implementing a policy for their building? So this might not be to our panelists, it might also be to our people watching.
I'll talk about, I work for Mercy Housing. I'm a healthcare navigator and I cover 2 properties here in Lincoln and then 2 in Omaha. And we are currently smoke-free at all of our properties here, including e-cigarettes. And obviously marijuana is not legal here, so we don't, it's included, but we don't have to put that in there. And it was a process. It was about a 9-month process, and it started off with flyers letting everybody know like the date that we are planning on going smoke-free, and then our resident service coordinator included information in the monthly newsletters every month, so that the residents could see that. And then we also sent out surveys to residents a couple months after, just asking them, how they felt about it, how hard it would be for them, would they like information or resources. And it's no longer like they cannot smoke on property, and they actually have to go to like the sidewalk or off property. There's not even you can't even smoke just outside, like on the porch or anything, or on their balconies. It's no smoking on any of the properties. So if they do get caught smoking, it's a lease violation. I mean, obviously people are still smoking in their apartments. You'll go into the buildings and you can smell it, but unless you see them actually smoking, you can't really give them a lease violation. You can't just go off of smell. So that's kind of hard sometimes, because an apartment building, a whole complex will smell like it and you don't really know which apartment it's coming from. But I would say the majority of people follow. You know, you do have the people who are obviously still smoking in their apartments, or they'll wait till property management leaves for the day and then they'll smoke in their apartments, and while property management is there, you'll see them, you know, go to the sidewalk to smoke. So it's a tricky one.
Thanks for sharing, Keisha.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any feedback, I guess, positive or negative, other than compliance, just the general opinion of your tenants?
You know, I feel like a lot of the residents like that it's smoke-free. You do get those couple that complain, but part of my job is to also give them like the information that I gather from Lincoln and from team in Omaha, pass that out to residents if they need assistance or education, and to help them however I can if they would like it, and before COVID and hopefully after COVID, hold programming like surrounding or like regarding smoking cessation. So.
Great, thank you. Did anyone else want to share a personal experience?
This is Bonnie McPhillips. I just want to thank you guys for all the resources you provided us way back when we went smoke-free. I'm with the Columbus Housing Authority. It was one of the best things we did. I think most of my tenants think it's great, but the smokers sometimes are not too happy about it. So I will just say the biggest challenge with this policy is enforcement, no question. Definitely in the dead of winter, we know many of our residents who smoke are still smoking in that apartment. So it's catching them, it's he said, she said, between neighbors. And so that's probably been the biggest challenge that I've had is enforcing it. And then HUD requires that they have to smoke 25 feet from any building. Well, if it's 10 below zero outside, you can bet your bottom dollar they're not going 25 feet from a building. And so some of that I look the other way because I serve seniors and very disabled people, but we get a lot of tattletales then, people letting us know about that. But, you know, any pointers on enforcing it to me is the biggest challenge because we know what's happening. And I appreciate Keisha being honest about it because we know they're smoking in there, but we can't always detect it. And that makes it very challenging. And you take somebody who can hardly walk, and for them just to get outside their door is probably going to be the best you're going to get from them. So it's just hard to enforce, I guess.
Yeah, we definitely recognize that, Bonnie. That's why we dedicated all of next week just to talking about enforcement. So we'll definitely take a deeper dive into that next week as far as recommendations, best practices, and definitely leaving some room for questions that aren't addressed during our prepared portion. So don't worry, that's going to get a lot of attention. Does anybody else have a personal testimony they want to share or a question?
I think what I'd love to do would be to put up that one slide too, where it talks about the plan. Somebody had asked about the plan. And in addition to the resources that you guys have, there's also some national resources that are really, really good. So there's just some tips just for you guys, just for the building managers and maintenance staff on some websites too.
Yeah, and Shar, will there be links to that on our landing page on the ANR page? Yeah.
Absolutely. Links to entire sections just about smoke-free multi-unit housing, because we know it's important. And we want you guys to have a lot of tools. We
Right.
even put together some resources on incentives for folks to really go by the policy.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I will be sending out a link to that landing page in our final email when we also send the evaluation for the series. So don't worry, that is coming. I do have one last question that came in with registration that is specifically about the resources that are available, and in particularly the signage, like where's a good place to put signage, or if you have all this educational material, where do you put the educational material? What's the best place to get it in front of people where they're actually going to pay attention to it?
I can talk a little bit about that. We do newsletters for most of our properties. So really, we update tenants through newsletters, either monthly or every 3 months, typically. And then the signage we put typically on the front door of the buildings. We have elevators in some of our buildings, so that'll be by the elevator. Just regular places where people are going in and out of the building, just to try to remind them of the smoke-free policy.
Great, thank you, Susan. What about, does anybody have thoughts on the educational materials other than the newsletters? I know Keisha mentioned having an in-person presentation, which we are available for that by request if we have the capacity to do it. Does anybody have any other educational opportunities that they've utilized or would suggest? No, and that's okay. We're here to help. So contact us if you'd like to take advantage of that. All right, we are right here near the end. So if anyone wants to sneak in a last minute question, go ahead, or comment. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to share?
You know, I wanted to just maybe as we're wrapping up is, you know, I've heard a number of stories from both property managers as well as public housing authority directors of stories of they coming back after they've had the policy in place and hearing from or finding out that one of their residents quit as a result of the policy going into place, or that they've had a number of those happen. And you know, I know that there's lots of economic advantages to making your property smoke free, and cleaning costs and all of those kinds of things too. But also know that, you know, you can have that kind of health impact on your tenants and residents as well as you're doing this. So hang on to those. There'll be some tough times sometimes when it comes to enforcement and remaining consistent on that, but also remember the advantages that you're getting from it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for highlighting that personal impact that you're making with the smoke-free policies, Jeff. Well, I just want to go ahead and just thank everybody for being here. Thank our panelists again for their great information. And we'll see everybody next week for our final webinar on enforcement. And so I know we're all excited about that. We will see you next week at 11:30. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.